Welcome to Danièle's podcast. In this episode, we explore Showtunes from the Shadows, the latest album from the ever-inventive Helen McCookeryBook, released in January. From the very first listen, this album captivates with its rich blend of influences. Hints of Petula Clark in Three Cheers for Toy Town, playful nursery rhyme riffs in Ginger Line, and echoes of Kevin Ayers and Bobby Gentry's throughout. It is a collection that feels both nostalgic and fresh, weaving together theatrical storytelling with a punk-tinged edge. A few weeks ago, I had the pleasure of speaking with Helen over Zoom when we discussed the creative process behind the album, the unexpected influences that shaped it, and how she brings together such a fascinating mix of sounds.
Well, I think it's my personal listening history, probably. I mean, I've always had really eclectic music taste, and from being a child, sort of listening to children's radio shows and everything on the BBC, watching films, liking soundtracks in films. And yeah, I mean, Petula Clark, I'm very flattered by that, because she was, even though she's not so remembered now, she was a big figure in British pop, massive figure. And I just thought she was so glamorous, And all of these things, when you're a kid, you think, I'm never going to be, number one, I'm never going to be able to grow up. I don't know how people do that. And number two, when I do grow up, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to do anything interesting. I think I'm going to be stuck, very, I was a very shy child. And I think I was almost like blotting paper. I just absorbed everything. And it's only natural that once you start writing songs, especially if you're not trained to do that, what you're drawing on is everything that you've absorbed when you were a kid or through other parts of your life. And it's almost like a language, I suppose, rather than speaking. I always feel that there are things that I say in songs that I can't articulate in straightforward speech, even though I'm very good at talking. You'll realise by the end of the interview. But there are certain things that are so nuanced, they're difficult to describe just in speech. And if you add music to them, there's an emotional intensity to adding music to your speech. So all of those musical elements come together, and then I have my idea about what I want to write about in terms of the lyrics. And I've got this funny voice. I'm limited by my voice. I can't belt things out, really. I can't. I've never been able to. I'm not like one of those big diva singers. I've got my own voice, and so I'm kind of limited. I've got quite a big range, and I'm very good at harmonising, but I'm kind of limited in the type of song that I sing by the sort of voice that I've got. So a lot of it is to do with making something out of what I've got, which is, I think I've kind of had to do that, but in some ways it's given me a style that's my own. So I'm quite grateful.
Helen's vocal delivery immediately stood out, layered, textured, and beautifully arranged, evoking the rich harmonies I love in the Beach Boys. This depth adds something truly special to the album. With that in mind, I asked her about the intriguing title, Showtunes from the Shadows.
Well, quite a long time ago, I've always had great trouble in describing my music. And some people say, oh, it's jazz, but I'm not. I've got no clue what I'm playing half the time. I don't know the names of my chords a lot of the time. So I'm definitely not jazz. And I'm definitely not folk either, although, quite often I'm singing about I'm singing about now a lot of the time. So there's that element of it, which is quite a folky idea. I'm not indie. I mean, I play indie festivals and I play punk festivals. I play all different kinds of things because there's not a sort of definition of the type of music that I play. But I went to do a lady fest in Cardiff once, run by a woman called Debbie Withers, and I said to her, I can't describe my music. And she said, oh, it's Showtunes. And I thought, well, I suppose because I do really like musicals and things. And I thought, yeah, I suppose it is. But the thing is that Showtunes tend to be quite specific to the musical that they turn up in. Whereas each of these songs, even though I can imagine them being in musicals, they're not that kind of thing that belongs to one single narrative. There's lots of different stories going on. And a lot of the time, even though the melodies are quite uppy and the harmonies can be very sweet. I mean, some of them are quite discordant actually, but a lot of the time they're quite sweet. And I'm just thinking, actually, I'm singing about quite dark subjects sometimes. So I'm going to call this Showtunes from the Shadows. And I actually made the puppets on the cover. And as I was making them, I actually found them quite scary. And I thought, what am I doing? I'm making something quite frightening. But it's part of the thing that on the surface, it sounds very nice and stuff like that. But actually, the underlying thing is quite sharp and quite, it's not comfortable at all. I want them to be to have a sense of slight unease behind all the sort of cheerfulness and stuff. So I'm hoping that comes across in the music, you know.
Next, I asked her about the imagery of the album cover: puppets, open bird cages, and the contrast between captivity and freedom. I had a feeling this tied closely to Helen's DIY ethos and her talents beyond music, including illustration.
Yes, I did. And I mean, the whole theme of the cover is really control and escape, because I think human beings, but definitely women, find themselves in their lives in situations where they are being controlled by other people. And the idea of the puppets is I didn't realize it at the time, but a few years ago, I wrote a book about women producers and engineers and how important it is that we hear how women mediators present women's music, because there's usually a man in between what the woman sings and sometimes even, you know, the lyrics and stuff. And then there's this kind of whole sort of sequence of male gatekeepers before the music comes out. And the idea of women being puppets and being controlled by men. And so, yes, there's the puppets there, but then behind them, there's the bird cage with the birds escaping from the cage, which is when you get out of that situation, first of all, you have to identify that you're in that situation. It's quite difficult because it's so normal. And then you sort of see it and then you think, actually, I'm going to get out. And it's quite difficult to get out of because every single bar of that cage is somebody around you saying, no, don't do that. It's not normal. You can't do that. This is the way society is. And so that's what the significance of, it sounds really complicated for something that's just a sort of image on the front of an album, but I did think about all of it. And I feel, you know, although I go out and I do gigs and that's quite a sort of extrovert thing to do, I spend a lot of time at home thinking and trying to sort of work out why things happen and why sort of certain sections of society are repressed and how that repression works and how it's normalized and things. And that sounds very kind of pedantic, but if you can put that into a visual image and if you can put it into your song lyrics, then you can make people listen to it without resisting what you're saying, which they might resist if you were having a conversation. Well, they do resist. I've had lots of people becoming borderline aggressive when I've sort of said, actually, it's wrong that men are always producers, and you know, people find it a very difficult thing to think about.
The album cover and its vivid theme perfectly mirror the cinematic storytelling in Helen's lyrics. The opening track, 3 Cheers for Toy Town, stands out with its sharp observation wrapped in a brass-laden melody. I was curious, how did this song come together and why start the album with it?
That's basically a description of where I live. And it's, you know, I live in a suburb where everybody's all nice on the surface, but they're actually, you know, we have a street WhatsApp and they do things like ganging up on local shops where people have got brown skin and things. And you're reading between the lines. It's actually incredibly passive aggressive. And I felt that ever since I moved here. We moved here with our kids when our kids were really young, we were living in central London, which is very, multicultural and all of that kind of thing. And you don't realise until you move to a place like this, where it looks so very nice on the surface, but actually a lot of what's being done is keeping people out and making them feel uncomfortable if they're different. And so I go for a walk every day, and there are the ponds, there are the pines, there are the naughty boys throwing beer cans at the ducks, and nobody's paying any attention to them, and people just not liking very large numbers of people who are not like them. And the not like them kind of lens is really, it can be focused on all kinds of not like them, it's kind of, in my street, there are gay people, gay men, there are lesbians, but they still manage to be prejudiced against other people who are not like them. And I think it's so complicated. So how can they be so complicated? So that song's about them. And I thought, well, I'm going to sing it because everybody's really quite smug. They're very, look at us. We've got a house, we've got a car, look at my car, look at this. And all of that kind of thing. I think I'm going to write a song that sounds as though it's an anthem for them, but actually it's the opposite of that. And the idea of having the trumpet is like, yes, triumphal, triumphal thing. And I mean, Terry's a great player. He's got that lovely, clear, yes, here we are with the great suburban English, great suburban English people. And yet, but the actual lyrics on, no, they're not, it's kind of, sometimes when I'm writing these things, I don't always realise how specific I'm being, but I did play that song at this gig in Brighton. I had this huge roar of laughter from this woman. She's called Lorraine Bowen, actually. She won Britain's Got Talent, but she turned up, and I was I was really surprised that people listened to the lyrics so carefully at a live gig. But it's so fulfilling to be able to that people actually understand what I'm doing and actually think it's funny. I know it's probably quite mean, writing details, filleting everybody who lives around me, but they're not very nice to me either, and they're nice on the surface, but not. And it's like kind of, well, if you're going to do that to me, I'm going to do it back. And the best way to do it, rather than sort of putting aggressive things on the street WhatsApp, I'm going to write a song that they're never going to hear, and just kind of, and people will recognise it, because I think suburban, a lot of suburban people are like that anyway, no matter where they are. So,
as an opener, Three Cheers for Toy Town is an irresistibly catchy tune driven by bright, cheery brass. But beneath the lively melody lies a sharp contrast, the reality of the lyrics. I wanted to know more about this dynamic and what led to choosing this track to kick off the album.
Well, I thought I'd start with a fanfare, because the other thing is that quite often in my life I've been quite self-deprecating, and this is actually the first album that I've released, proper album that I've released on another label rather than releasing myself. So this has distribution, so it's in record shops. And I was so busy recording it, I didn't give that much thought. But as I was mixing it, I was thinking, I really know how to do this, because I'm getting exactly what's in my head coming out of the speakers or out of the headphones. I do actually know what I'm doing. I've always thought, oh yes, I just do, I'll try doing this, I'll try doing that, it might be okay. But I started to feel very confident while I was doing it. And I just thought, why not do a big fanfare at the beginning and be confident? Because it's not a luxury that I've had a lot of time in my life, because I've done so many different things, and I've often been a beginner, the bottom of the ladder kind of thing. Now, why not be at the top of the ladder and start with a fanfare? So who do I want to do that fanfare? And I'd met Terry before a couple of times. Normally he's not in my orbit. He's a few notches up from some of my music communities, you would call it. And when I contacted him straight away, he said yes. Yes, I thought, that's exactly, a big vote of confidence. So yeah, and he's just got that exactly right sound for that kind of, yes, you know, I'm here, you know, this is what I'm saying kind of thing.
Track 2, The Ginger Line, has a poetic flow, weaving together nursery rhyme playfulness with calypso-inspired riffs. I was curious to hear more about the calypso influence. Where did it come from, and how did it shape the song?
I've got a kind of affinity for South American rhythms, actually. It probably came from the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, where you had a lot of crossover between disco and calypso music, or you know, basically South American rhythms. A lot of the people like August Darnell and a lot of other producers, actually, they were from that kind of, it was like New Yorican, I can't really say it, but it's like a lot of Puerto Rican people. And there's something about that kind of, about those rhythms that I find very danceable. And when I wrote that song, I was actually on the train, and it's a celebration of difference. Again, it's the opposite of the first song, I suppose, because I was going to work and I wrote it in my head, and there were all of these different cultures on the train, you know, all perfectly happy, African people, Muslim guys in full dress, school kids, just everybody. I just thought, actually, you know, coming in from the suburbs where everything's very regimented and you have to really define who you are and everything, nobody on that train was defining who they were. They were just being who they were and going to work or to school or whatever it was. And it's that whole thing of being a person who's felt different all their life, coming to a big city, and in big cities everywhere, different people who are different are welcomed. Actually, you know, they may not be the cleanest, loveliest places in the world. You may have really rubbish living conditions and things like that. But a lot of the time, there's this acceptance of who people are, and not even thinking twice about what nationality people are, what their religious beliefs are, what gender they are. And so that's very much a celebration of that. And it just came out that way, just sort of sitting there, because I write a lot of songs in my head, you know, and well, it says in that song, writing a song in my head on the way, you know, I write them in my head, and then when I get off the train, I quickly switch on my phone and record the melody in the first line, and then finish it off when I get home. And it really is, that song really is a celebration of cultural difference. And I suppose that rhythm came with the song, you know.
Helen's songwriting is filled with captivating narratives, as heard in tracks like Spy and Reaching for Hope. Each song unfolds like a short story. I wanted to know how she crafts these narratives and bring them to life in these songs.
Well, they're two different types of song, really. I mean, Reaching for Hope is actually about, it's quite personal. And it's about how you have to renegotiate friendships when something happens like the pandemic, or at the moment, all this kind of moral panic around trans people, where people that you've known all your life and are part of your community start to articulate views that you really don't agree with. And yet you know them to be, or you have known them to be, a kind, tolerant person. I mean, a lot of my friends have come out of the punk movement, which was very, very embracing of difference. And how do you find that germ of friendship that's been so much a part of your past, and how do you hang on to that when a person is really has changed radically from the person that you knew back then? And how do you keep a bridge between you and them, even though, you know, you're going to see them at a gig, or you're going to see them in the street, or, you know, around a friend's house or something, but they're actually not a person that you would be a friend with if you met them now. And that's quite complicated, but I think that goes for a lot of people. And that's what that song is. I mean, sometimes you become your own therapist in a song, And that song in particular is that it's me talking to myself and saying, how am I going to do this? How am I going to negotiate this? You know, maybe they don't see a problem. They're not negotiating it. I'm still being bombarded by petitions that I don't want to sign, you know. So how do I negotiate that? So it's a bit of a kind of question, even though it sounds as though, well, no, it is. It ends in a question. Are they going to, you know, is it going to be okay when I speak to them? Whereas Spy, and there's 2 or 3 songs. I'm a real reader of charity shop detective novels. I read so many of them. I probably read one every 2 days and then take it back to the shop and get another one, you know. And I just wanted to tell a detective story, and it's very sad. It's about a rookie spy, and I envision her as a woman. And yeah, you were talking about the 1960s. I envision her with one of those big 1960s flick-up hairdos. You know, she's been sent on a mission. She's been sent abroad on a mission. She's a sacrifice, really. She's been sent on this mission, and she gets assassinated when she's abroad. And then a plane travels home, and she's not on it. But it's kind of about insignificance too, because a lot of people aren't very important or don't feel very important. And because a spy's job is to be secretive, isn't it? So if something happens to a spy, you're never going to really know exactly what the true story was. So it's kind of about that, you know. And in a funny sort of way, it's interesting that you picked up on that, because only one other person I've spoken to I got a letter from somebody saying, that's my favourite song. And in that song, because it's straight storytelling, I really enjoyed singing it. And out of all of the songs on the album, because the voice is so exposed and because there are no harmonies, that one I think I'm proudest of that vocal performance, because it's actually quite hard to sing because it's very exposed. It's very easy to, you know, you can bury vocal oddities under harmonies and under, you know, but that's a very, very exposed vocal. And it also involved, because it's quite long, it's about 4 minutes long, it involved sort of sticking to a mood. And with all of them, because I tried with all of them, I wanted to sing them all the way through and not do a lot of faffing about with different takes and things like that. I wanted to make them as live as possible, so they felt very authentic and genuine when people are listening to them. And I, you know, quite often with pop music, people make an assembly of different vocal takes. So you're hearing one line done, you know, on Thursday, and then another line done 3 weeks later or something. And I wanted these to be very concentrated in a particular time span, and to get them as one take as possible. And that's pitiful at home, because you're not paying anybody. You know, you're not having to worry about studio time because you're messing things up. You can mess it up, and I wander around the kitchen and put the microphone in the best place, and I can sort of hear it in my headphones. Is this song going to sound best if I sing it over by the cooker, or, you know, over by the door to the bathroom, you know, whatever it is. So a lot of it's minimal intrusion of effects and things as well. It's I have a little bit of reverb on things, but a lot of the time I'm actually kind of singing it with very few effects. And if I'm singing it very unevenly, then maybe that's not the day I should sing it. I should come back and sing it another day and just do the whole thing when I'm in better voice, kind of thing. So I mean, I could, you know, it's a very odd way of, in terms of pop production, it's very odd, but in terms of people working at home, it's completely normal, I think. I think a lot of people who record at home do that.
Just an echo.
Something Helen said while talking about reaching for hope sparked a deeper question. How does she see the difference between the punk days and today, especially with the many uncertainties people now face?
Well, in terms of uncertainty, I feel what's happened is that the rock's been turned over and we can see the insects underneath it. And I think some of the people who were excluded from society, like a lot of the punks, we knew about all of those insects under the rock, because people were quite aggressive to us because of our difference. And now what's happened is that the rock's been turned over and everybody can see it. And that's very uncomfortable because the insects are scurrying in lots of different directions. And which one do you, which one do you deal with, In terms of sort of negotiating, I mean, everybody has a timeline of their life. These things happen. We contribute to art and to culture and things. For people like me, for musicians and artists and writers, it's our responsibility to make the narrative less toxic, I think. I hate to use the word toxic because everybody does, but it's our responsibility to give more nuance to things rather than the shouting of politics, the corruption of business and that kind of thing. We have to keep a steady hand on our boats, and that's kind of what our job is. And we have to be, the whole time I'm writing lyrics, I have to be very careful to not overstep the mark. And there are some messages in the songs that are so buried that I think only if you spoke to me, I think you would realize what they're actually about. And because I want to be able to change people's minds or to affirm things that they believe without being didactic. And I think that's part of the fun of writing songs, because you have this kind of thing, how much do I want to be really literal about and how much do I want to be metaphorical about? I always think it's like doing puzzles. You've got a puzzle in front of you. How are you going to solve it?
Showtunes from the Shadows also features some fascinating collaborations, adding unique textures and perspectives to the album. I was curious to hear more about the people Helen worked with and how their contributions helped shape the project.
Yeah, I wanted different personalities. I mean, Robert Rotifer is an Austrian musician who I've collaborated with in the past, and he is a really, really good rhythm guitarist. He's very energetic. He's a very different personality to me. We've done quite a lot of gigs together just doing our collaboration music. I'd love to invite Robert to the party, and I asked him if he'd do it, and he said yes straight away and came up with really great parts. And I was just thinking, who do I want at the party, and who is going to make the music the way it wants? I know Winston Blissett, who played bass on Reaching for Hope. I know him from when we were about 25. We had a mutual friend, Dubula, who was in Temple of Sound and Transglobal Underground, who unfortunately died a couple of years ago. And I hadn't seen Winston for ages. I thought, I would love to have Winston. So I contacted him, and it's really nice to reconnect. This is literally years and years, and to have his sound on the record. I have a guy called Jack Hayter, who I saw playing blues music, but I knew that he was a pedal steel player and a lap steel player, so I asked him to come along. I invited Gina Birch to come and do backing vocals because she's a really great friend of mine, and she's got such a different vocal timbre to me. I just thought that's going to really add something to the backing vocals on some of the songs, because you don't want it you don't want to be Mike Oldfield and it's all Mike Oldfield playing everything. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to try to be that. And yes, Terry, and so it's and Leicester Square, who I've done so many collaborations with him, and I've co-wrote a song on one of his albums, and we've been friends for a very long time. And again, I thought I really, really want him. There's no guitarist in the world like him. He's absolutely unique. And I chose a song for him to play on, the song is actually about Boris Johnson and other people who sort of lie and even believe their own lies. And because me and Leicester Square are very kind of aligned politically, he's an environmental campaigner, all kinds of things. I just thought he's going to know exactly what I'm saying in that song. And when he sent me the music, he said, "Oh, I know you're from Scottish heritage, Helen, so I've made the guitar sound like bagpipes." And once he said that, I listened to it. Yes, he has, and there's that kind of thing, people just bringing stuff to it that is, I couldn't have imagined myself in sound or in concept or something. And it just makes it, yeah, like I said, more of a party rather than just me listening to my own voice,
To wrap things up, I wanted to know where people can get their hands on Showtunes from the Shadows and what Helen's touring schedule looks like these days.
Okay, well, the album's available on Bandcamp, but it is in record shops, actually. So I'm doing some record store days. I've got a launch in London on the 5th of April in the afternoon at the Betsy Trotwood. I'm travelling all over the place, actually. I'm getting more gigs are coming in, but I'm going to be touring all the way through. I think my last gig that I've been asked to do is actually in June. I'm playing in Newcastle upon Tyne. I'm playing in Birmingham, just really all over the place. And I expect to be playing. Oh yes, I expect to be playing in Scotland later on in the year as well. So people ask me to play, and I just say yes. It's an adventure.